I took it upon myself to look at the data for the resorts, for the hotels, to see how much large groups they were also receiving as well, called travel whiffs in the hospitality industry. And I discovered that it had been growing, and it was mostly multi-generational travelers, and been growing. It started at 12% in 2010. And by 2018, when I was looking at it, it had grown to 19%, and it was forecasted to grow up to about 21% in 2020. I noticed, based on the guests or the party sizes, that about, if you do the math, it's, 1 in every 5 guests visiting Walt Disney World were traveling in a large party. That we needed larger accommodations to be able to accommodate these people, that hotels just weren't doing them justice.
All right. Well, first of all, welcome to the Spotlight Podcast. And this week we have a really awesome guest. It's Ed Sanchez. He's with the Evermore in Orlando. So, Ed, would you be cool to give me like an intro and kind of just a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into revenue? And I think your path to your current role is really interesting as well, because you've, just looking at your LinkedIn profile, obviously you started at, it looks like the Disney company in there. Also, too, you've worked with vacation rentals, and then you've got really, really interesting background. Could you tell me more about that?
Certainly. Actually, I have 26 years in revenue management. I started my revenue management career actually at American Airlines. And during my tenure at American Airlines, I've happened to be there for the 9/11 attacks. As you know, 2 of American Airlines' aircraft were affected that day. And I would happen to be at headquarters that day. And I look at that day as a good and bad day. It was obviously an awful day, but it was a good day in that we became true revenue management analysts that day, trying to get every little bit of data from that. And that's where I kind of learned my ways of doing things in revenue management. Then from the airlines, I moved over to Disney. I worked at Disney for 12 years. And again, mostly in resorts revenue management. I finished my career there in food and beverage revenue management. Mm-hmm. I left there to go back to the hospitality revenue management at Margaritaville. And then during COVID, I worked in the family business, which is vacation rental properties in California, and then moved to Evermore, where I'm currently at, which is a vacation rental resort property.
Awesome. Yeah, and your background is like, you're the perfect fit for the role that you're in right now, right? Because you guys are so close to Disney, and you've got experience with Disney, and then you've got that experience with vacation rentals at your own company, and it's just kind of like this seems like a perfect fit for you there at Evermore.
It is. And in fact, when I was at Disney, it was the first time that I saw an opportunity for large accommodations in the Central Florida market, as I was actually tasked with a project to help the restaurants at Walt Disney World understand how many large parties they're receiving. And so in that project, what I did is in the process of trying to figure out how many large parties were being accommodated at Disney, when this is at the restaurants defined as 9 guests or more in the restaurants, I took it upon myself to look at the data for the resorts, for the hotels, to see how much large groups they were also receiving as well, called travel whiffs in the hospitality industry. And I discovered that it had been growing, and it was mostly multi-generational travelers, and been growing. It started at 12% in 2010. And by 2018, when I was looking at it, it had grown to 19%, and it was forecasted to grow up to about 21% in 2020. And at that time, I noticed, based on the guests or the party sizes, that about, if you do the math, it's 1 in every 5 guests visiting Walt Disney World were traveling in a large party. That we needed larger accommodations to be able to accommodate these people. That the hotel rooms just weren't doing them justice. We had them separated most of the time, and so I had recommended large houses for Disney. And I said in my deck, the larger the better. And when I saw the concept, obviously Disney chose not to go down that route, but a few years after that analysis, ironically, Evermore came up with their concept, in which, obviously attracted my attention because it was in line with the data that I had discovered while at Disney. And I definitely wanted to come aboard with this project. So it's almost like a passion project for me. They also had seen the same thing. that these types of accommodations were needed in this market, but in a resort setting. Because one of the things I discovered at Disney is that grandma and grandpa were probably the ones that were paying for the accommodation, but they didn't really want to go in the parks too much. They wanted to go in the parks maybe one time in their stay, and then the rest they would just stay at the resort. But they wanted a place where they can have a nice sit-down lunch with the resort setting, with all the resort amenities. So Evermore checks off all those boxes. So for me, this is the resort of the future. This is where hospitality is going.
Yeah. I totally agree. And let's actually, I want to circle back and kind of talk about that, like multi-generation travel and, and like the grandparents or the parents, picking up the bill for the family. Because that was a big question I had about, like demographic trends of travel and, how you were able to kind of spot that trend was coming. Let's back up first a little bit. And can you tell me more about, let's just talk about the Evermore Resort itself. So I started jotting down some questions, and then as I was jotting these down, I kind of realized these questions might not even really make sense to ask, right? Like I put down, okay, how many keys is the Evermore Resort? But you may not think of it in those kind of terms, right? Can you kind of explain what makes the Evermore so unique? Because, like I mentioned when you first jumped on, right, you've got villas and flats and you've got the houses and there's also the Conrad is there. Can you kind of explain, I guess, first of all, just what the Evermore is? And that can be everything that's on property, just so our viewers kind of understand a little bit more about the Evermore there at Orlando, or in Orlando.
Yeah. So, you use the word unique, and when I describe this resort, I do use the word unique, but I always tell people, that word is overused. I think whenever people describe this, but it's so unique, and it's really not. It just happens to be, a different version of something else that you've seen in the past. Evermore truly defines the word unique in every aspect, because it is a first of its kind resort in many ways. Firstly, you mentioned, we have 3 different types of what we call units instead of keys, because each unit has multiple rooms. So we have the villas, which are 2 and 4 bedroom villas. You can get 2 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms. We have 19 2 bedrooms and 21 4 bedroom villas. The 2 bedroom villas are 1,800 square feet, which represent our smallest unit on property. And the 4 bedroom units, the 4 bedroom villas, which are 2,800 square feet. Then we have our flats product, which is more like a condominium style product, which are also 1,800 square feet. They all have 4 bedrooms, and they all sleep 11 guests. We have standardized bedding in all of our accommodations. And then we have 69 single family homes, which range from 5 bedroom to 11 bedroom homes. And those range from about a 3,300 square foot house to a 7,800 square foot house, which is our 11 bedroom house. They sleep anywhere from 15 guests to 32 guests. So you can see very large accommodations. But the uniqueness of it is that everything is standardized. So all of our 5 bedroom homes sleep 15 guests. They all have identical bedding. They have identical everything. They're basically the same house, just in a different lot. And that gives us an advantage over our competitors, because again, one of the complaints you have in the VR world is that there's not a consistency there with the accommodation. Right. So all of our 11 bedroom houses are exactly the same. All of our 10 bedroom houses are exactly the same. And there is continuity with all of our accommodations, but they're all located in a full service luxury resort, which has 2 18-hole Jack Nicklaus design golf courses. You have the 433 room Conrad resort that also has a signature restaurant on the top called Saba that is open for all of Evermore guests to use. We also have, as our anchor to the resort, our 8-acre Crystal Lagoon, Lagoon, Evermore Bay. So it's, in essence, you can swim in it, you can kayak and paddleboard in it, and all kayaks and paddleboards are included with your stay. So, nice. There's no extra charge for that. And, we have a water slide. We have a swing that you can swing into Evermore Bay with. We have overwater cabanas, which, you for a small fee, you can rent out every day. We have also, surrounding the entire Evermore Bay is 22 acres worth of beach sand that was brought in from Pensacola Beach, Florida. It is for, I grew up in Southern California on the beach. So I remember the first time when I went out there, once we started accepting guests, I saw people throwing the football on the beach, playing smash ball on the beach. It, for all intents and purposes, was a beach. People were behaving like it was a beach, and they still do. So it's a wonderful thing to see. But that's when it's a full encompassing resort. People don't want to leave here, and we're literally located right across the street from Walt Disney World. Yep. And in a prime location. This is considered an upscale neighborhood here in Orlando. There's no traffic around here at all, and it's easy access to not only Walt Disney World but to SeaWorld and to Universal. So no one's tried it this way before. Most of our competition is located down in a town called Kissimmee, which is further south of the parks, and there's tons of traffic there. You don't have to deal with it at all here. You are literally at the Magic Kingdom in a 10-minute drive. No traffic.
That's awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was when I was doing some research on the property. It's funny you mentioned that, because that was like one of the YouTube influencers that I saw. He kept saying like, I feel like I'm in the Bahamas, but I know I'm in Orlando. Like,
yeah. And when you see Evermore Bay for the first time, it takes your brain a few seconds to kind of comprehend what it's seeing. It's a man-made lake. No alligators. I can tell you, no alligators are in there. We have a special system to make sure all critters stay out, and it's spectacular. We also did a study that I think it was something like 90% of guests that stay at beach resorts don't go into the water. They just like to see it, and they don't go in because they're afraid something's going to bite them. But here, you don't have to worry about that. Everybody can get in and swim comfortably, and there's no problem of little critters biting you.
That's how I am when I go to the beach. I'm a sit and observe kind of person, Cool. So let's. I do want to drill into especially the short-term rental and the vacation rental part a little bit. I think that will interest a lot of our viewers, because obviously that's a very hot topic. And as I was doing research, I came across this stat, and this probably won't shock you, but for me, it was like a jaw-dropping moment. I didn't realize that Orlando is the #1 supply market for short-term rentals. That's crazy. That's so correct. It beats out LA and New York City, New York, and Chicago. It's literally the #1. And another thought that I had too is, back when I used to work on property at select service properties, a lot of times we would have, family reunions would call up, or we would have sports teams or something like that. And a lot of times the sales department and even operations, or sometimes even myself, right, we would say like, do we really want to take this piece of business, because they're going to eat all the food in the buffet and they're going to cram 6 people into the room. And really, I think we didn't realize that was a missed opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we should have been able to accommodate those kind of groups, but just we were kind of confined in our thinking of, we don't really want to take big families and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So what we were doing was we were pushing away these families, and instead what they were doing was they were going on, Airbnb, or now turning to Vrbo or something like that, and they're renting a whole house, right? It's just a better proposition for them. But we as hoteliers, we were missing out on that revenue, because we were basically turning this guest away, right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you kind of identified that either this trend was coming, or that was like an underserved demographic. Can you kind of talk about kind of the whole evolution of that? I mean, that may be too big of a topic to touch on, but could you kind of talk through that a little bit, and how you saw that underserved market?
That is why we built Evermore. So Evermore was purpose built for families. So when you stay in an Evermore accommodation, so if let's say even an 11-bedroom home that sleeps 32 guests, every person in that party has a seat at the table. So we have a table that's large enough to, including counter space, to accommodate 32 people sitting and dining together. So one of the things that we found was, at the end of the day, we talked about the grandparents. The grandparents want to be able to spend time with their children and their grandchildren in one spot, right, in the living room. But we wanted to make sure that they're comfortable, because we didn't want anyone to have to sit. And it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you, to sit in a couch with a plate of food on your lap. We didn't want that. So we purpose built our houses to be able to have everybody sit at a table together. and have a meal together at a table so that no one has to sit on a couch. So we've really focused on those little details of family outings and family gatherings, family reunions that make a difference here at Evermore, and it was built for that purpose. So whereas you mentioned it is challenging to take these large parties when you're at a restaurant, for example, we've designed the resort to be able to accommodate easily all of those guests.
Awesome. And let me ask you this. So knowing that you're in that competitive Orlando market, and that's also kind of your key demographic, are you incorporating any like market intelligence, or do you have like custom comp sets built where you're kind of keeping an eye on what that Orlando short-term rental market is doing? Can you kind of talk through what maybe like market intelligence or kind of what analytics you're looking at just to keep your eye on the market?
Certainly. So we use Lighthouse to look at the lowest rates at our competitors. Our competitors are a combination. It's a combination of vacation rental properties, but also luxury hotel properties, because we've noticed that we've been able to steal share from both because of our uniqueness, right? So, for example, our flats, the comp set for the flats isn't really homes in the area, it's hotels. So we're focused on finding those families that might have gotten 2 rooms at, let's say, the Waldorf. And instead of having 2 hotel rooms that might be connected by a door, well, they can come here and get a flat where they have a living room, a little bit more living space, a full-size washer and dryer to be able to accommodate that. And, my children are now 17 and 15, but it wasn't too long ago when we would go to, go on vacation and really need to have that washer or dryer to be able to wash some of their clothes because they soiled themselves or they got dirty someplace. So we've taken care of that. So there's a lot of advantages to that. So as I mentioned, though the flats take from the hotels, and of course the houses compete with the local vacation resorts in the area, but nothing compares to Evermore. They have just pieces of Evermore. We're very much upscale, much more upscale. We're a full service resort. We have 24-hour engineering. If something breaks in your house, we fix it immediately. An engineer will show up at your door within 5 minutes. So it is something at 24 hours a day. You have also a 24-hour a day guest service / concierge desk. So if you ever have any questions over the night, say you're having trouble in your home with the theater, they'll have someone come out and help you with it. So it's not like in the vacation rental world, the difference is something breaks, the likelihood of them fixing it while you're staying there is very low. Here, it will get fixed. So that's, again, one of those differentiators that we have here at Evermore over our comp set.
Nice. That's awesome. Here in just a little bit, I do want to ask you kind of about, I do have some questions specifically around like luxury resorts and that kind of thing, because I can see that you guys have definitely positioned yourself more in that luxury tier. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I will come back to that because I've got more questions. Trust me. Let me ask you a couple questions about international guests. So here, I mean, I was doing some, kind of prep work and putting together some questions. And so I had some assumptions about how much international travel you were doing, but obviously I would, love to hear it from you because you're going to know best. But I would assume that, you have large families coming. You probably have a, pretty relatively long average length of stay. I would guess that you're probably doing some international travel. Like how much would you say is international versus domestic? And then if you do have a fair amount of international travel, what are some of those key feeder markets for you there in Orlando?
Yeah, so right now we're still establishing ourselves with the international market. So our international share is low right now. It's probably about 5%. But as you can see, there's definite opportunity to grow that. And we fully intend on growing that. So what's happening right now with the drop in international travel isn't affecting us directly, but it is affecting us indirectly in that our competitors are suffering. And so when our competitors suffer, they drop their rates. And so that's been the challenge, right? Is that, there's been pressure on rates. Now, we lead the market in rates. In terms of our comp sets in the vacation rental world, we are the number one in terms of ADR, but for good reason, because we feel we offer a lot more value to the guest, that they are getting truly a full service resort. So right now, while we don't have international travel, we are working towards setting that up. So obviously with the UK operators, we're in talks with a few very large UK operators as well as a few very large Canadian operators. Canada is the number one international market in Central Florida. UK is number 2, and then number 3 is Brazil. And we are also talking with some operators in Brazil to increase that. We feel that we are ideally placed for all 3 of those markets, especially the UK and Brazil, that have longer length of stays, that intend on staying, that want to be close to the parks, but they don't go to the parks every day. So we give them something more to do here at Evermore.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. I was curious to know, I guess specifically about, because I figured Canada, just for those Canadian travelers to get that weather change, Orlando to them has to be paradise.
Yeah. Canada's huge. We will get there. It's just right now the lead time is about a year for some of these.
Right.
But we definitely are planning on making the big push internationally this year.
Yeah. All right. If you're watching from Canada, you know where to go next year.
Yes.
And I'll give you a little sneak preview too. By the time most of you are watching this, we will have already had our Impact of Uncertainty webinar. But here's some statistics that we were seeing. And this is kind of why I was asking specifically about Canada too. I was just curious if you were noticing any drop-offs, but we did see, this is Canadian search interest, by the way. So you can see that it's dropped off a lot for the U.S. and a lot of that demand is actually shifting to places like France and Mexico and stuff like that. But it sounds like you're still kind of ramping up that international. But in time, I bet that's going to be huge for you guys.
Yeah, we plan on having it be huge. Yes.
Let's shift gears and let's talk a little bit bigger picture before we get into some of the more nitty gritty kind of revenue management questions that we put together for you. But I did want to talk about just broader trends. So based on some of the whisperings that I'm hearing and some of the, like conventions and stuff that I've been to this year, I am noticing that, big management companies and real estate investment trusts are starting to take more note of specifically luxury and resorts. So I'm hearing a lot about luxury and resort right now. So why, I guess I want to ask you about the why that is. I have some theories that I may kind of throw your way and see what you think, but why is it that all of a sudden there's a lot of attention on that luxury and especially that resort accommodation type right now?
I can tell you that right now with the macroeconomic uncertainty that we've been seeing, the luxury segment has been less affected than other segments. That doesn't mean that moving forward that it'll be affected, but at least for right now, the luxury segment has been shielded by it. They continue to spend, they continue to travel. So the impact on a resort like Evermore, for example, has not been that big. And I think that's part of the reason why is because they're not as vulnerable to these economic swings that perhaps, you see these, middle tier or, upper middle tier hotels and resorts suffer through when we go through any kind of economic uncertainty. So that's probably one. And two, there's also the spend that happens on property. Luxury hotels and resorts tend to have larger spend on property than middle and upper middle scale resorts.
Yeah. And I think you said it well earlier when you said, like, once you're checked in, once you're on property, like, people don't want to leave, right? So is that part of it too? Because, it's almost like when you check in at the Evermore, and again, I haven't been there yet, but it seems like you check in and you can almost build your own itinerary of stuff that you want to do, and it's all on property, right? So you can go to a restaurant one day, or you can rent a cabana the next day. So is that maybe why people are kind of wising up to, resorts, that's actually a good idea, right? Because that guest is staying on property longer, they're spending more money at the property, they're exploring all the different amenities, and they're not going off property, in your case, unless it's probably to go to Disney World for a day or two, right?
But even for a resort that's located across the street from Walt Disney World, we don't get a lot of people that leave very often. They come here. There's so much to do because you can go on the beach, but we also have, we have the kayaks, the paddle boards. You mentioned the cabanas. We have this water slide. We have other amenities. You can do activities on property that we have. We do trivia. We do so many things. You can play golf. every day can be something different, and our guests definitely take advantage of that. You have to consider that for families, it's perfect. The resort is secure. We have two gates, but they're both, secure gates. So no one can just come in from off the street onto property. So it's a highly secured resort. Families feel safe. You can let your children roam around, the lagoon, and they'll be perfectly fine. And so there's plenty to do if they choose not to go to the resorts. And we've seen that, and they stay here and they love it. We have bars, we have a few bars. We have a beach bar, that's literally on the sand that you can go and get a drink. We have swings. We have all different types of seating all the way around on the beach, different things that you can do as well along the beach.
Now, can I ask you some candid revenue management questions?
Absolutely.
These were kind of put together. I kind of went around and asked various members on our team to, I gave them a little bit of your background and then the Evermore, and just because it's honestly, it's just so much different than any of the properties that we revenue manage, that we had a lot of questions for you. So I'll ask you maybe 4 or 5 of these really quick. One of the first ones, and keep in mind, these are questions coming from revenue managers. So top question, or one of the questions here was, is ADR even relevant? Are you looking at ADR, or are you more so looking at spend per guest or another metric?
Right. So we still look at ADR, definitely. But, any true revenue managers, ADR is nice to look at, but really you're looking at RevPAR. And if you want to take it even a step further, total RevPAR. So we are, still ramping up, but we are in the process of understanding what our guests are doing when they are on property. What are they spending on? Are they, how many times are they renting a cabana? Are they playing golf? Are they dining at our 3-meal restaurant? Are they, we have these sun carts that you can rent if you stay in a house. They're, basically golf carts you can run around the resort. We want to see how much they're spending, and not only that, what kind of groups are they? Is it those multi-generational travelers when they come on? We want to have a better understanding of it. So that is for us key, is to understand that guest behavior more so than just ADR. ADR is just one metric. We want to understand the full picture.
Yeah. Yep. Makes total sense. What about this one? So do you guys do any packages, or is it more, let's get the guest on property, and from there, they, like I said earlier, they build their own itinerary? So are there any packages that you guys do? Or?
Absolutely. We do packages. We are in the process of rolling out a golf package. So our houses weren't completed until December of 2024. So we've had now the opportunity to be able to build those golf packages for parties of 11 or less. For parties that are 12 or more, they're more than welcome to come as well. We would just handle them differently. So they would go to our sales department, and we would treat them as a group. But you won't be treated any less special either way. But the golf package is for those guests that want to play golf and be a little bit more casual, or maybe it's a party of 2, party of 3, whatever that might be, up to 11 guests, and stay and play. We are in the process of also rolling out more packages that we call, the more you choose to spend, the more you can save. So let's say they choose a cabana rental for 1 day or 2 days, and then they make a dining reservation and they play a round of golf. We'll be more than happy to give you a discount off of your accommodation. So those are things that we're looking at doing right now. So that's kind of like you build your own package.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Okay, let me do 2 more really quick. So what does collaboration look like between your sales and revenue department?
We talk every day. It's a great group of people here, but they have a little bit of a challenge. So Evermore is, again, as we talked about, a little bit of a different beast when it comes to groups. Groups are, in the Central Florida market, they tend to be used to staying in a hotel that's inside. So, your hotel's connected to the convention center. The good news is we do have the Conrad here that can accommodate those types of groups. But we still get groups. So we still get a lot of family reunions, for example, that want to stay in our houses. We do get some corporate retreats, which our resort is tailor-made for. And we're going to partner more with the Conrad for some of their groups, because in light of recent events where CEOs have felt like they've been targeted, they want extra security. So, our homes can be fully secured. They're very private. They have 8-foot walls, around them, so that guests can't really, or in the backyard, I should say. So they can have full privacy, and their security detail will have a lot easier time securing them. So we have those executive houses for them as well. So those are the types of groups that we've been looking at, as well as sports teams. So we've been expanding that out as well. Our plans are to work with the ESPN Wide World of Sports over at Disney to be able to accommodate some of the groups that they have, some of those teams. It could be cheer or it could be volleyball type groups. We also hosted the Atlantic 10 Golf Championship on property. So that is also something that we've been doing for group. And then, of course, last but not least, golf groups. Golf groups represent our largest segment of groups on property.
Awesome. Nice. And then here's the last question. As we know, your property is huge and unique. You're a revenue leader. What does a day in the life of Ed look like? Yeah. So people wanted to know, like, what do you even look at when you come into the office in the morning? Are you looking at a rate shop, a pickup report, or something totally different? Like, what's a day in the life when you come in the morning?
So I definitely look at my reports from Lighthouse to see what's been going on in the market. But I'll also look at my revenue management system to see what kind of pickup we had, yesterday, and just to see, how are we pacing in terms of, bookings for, the month, in the month, for the month, and also the following few months after that. And then since we have 29 what we call unit types, not room types, unit types, I make sure I check the forecast for all 29 to make sure that we're priced where we need to be. Because again, since we lead the market in pricing, we have to be very aware of, where are we, how is our pickup doing? Are we priced too high or priced too low? As I mentioned to you with the recent events with some of this macroeconomic uncertainty, we've had to take a close look at our pricing and make sure that we're priced right so that we're still staying in that value level for the guests that want to stay at Evermore. Because again, you're getting a lot for what you're paying for, but we don't want to overprice ourselves, especially when you consider the market.
Nice. That's perfect. Cool. Well, those are the questions I had.
Here, I can tell you that. Never a dull day here, Daniel.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And even if you do have a dull day, then you can just go out and hang out by the lagoon.
Oh, I'd be so happy to have a dull day. I really would love to have a dull day.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ed. Was there anything else that I maybe didn't ask that you wanted to talk about? Any like passion projects you have up there, or anything about revenue or not even revenue related that you wanted to touch on?
The only thing that I didn't mention, but for those revenue management geeks that are out there, we manage the resort like a hotel stack, which is very uncommon in the vacation rental world. So the reason why we're able to do that is because, as I mentioned, we don't sell our vacation rental units by address as most, if not all, vacation rental properties do. We sell it by unit type. So as I mentioned to you, I sell it by 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom, 7-bedroom, and so on. And that's how I've built my revenue management system with it. So I have a hierarchy that starts with the 2-bedroom villas and finishes with the 11-bedroom homes. And I can sell and overbook and upgrade into any of those accommodations without having to ask, individual owners. That's the one thing. Evermore has one owner. And that's why it's such an advantage for us, because I can upgrade, as I mentioned, from a 2-bedroom villa into an 11-bedroom home, no problem, because I don't have to meet any of these revenue minimums that you find commonly at these vacation rental resorts, where an individual owner will say, I don't want anybody who's going to pay me less than $500 a night, let's say. And so if that's the case, you can't upgrade anybody into that house unless they're pay more than $500 a night, which oftentimes ends up being very inefficient. And you end up with that unit going empty one night, and you might have to walk somebody off property, for example. So here we don't run into those issues at all. And that's, since I manage it like a hotel, it's very smooth, and my forecast is very clean.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that was actually going to be kind of like a question that was in the back of my mind as we were talking was, so I guess you guys have the standardization across the villas and flats and then the houses, and then you have the scale to where you can almost manage them as though they were room types, but
Correct.
Obviously you call them something totally different. Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think Right. Yeah. Because if you're just a short-term rental, a standard short-term rental operator, then you're thinking in terms of, okay, I've got these keys or these addresses.
Yeah, there's
But you
there's
guys,
nothing standard about. We're not. I don't even consider
yeah,
this a vacation rental property because it sells us short. We are
yeah,
definitely, we're a hybrid between a hotel and a vacation rental. We take the best of both worlds and combine them. And there is no other experience like Evermore in the world.
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a very clever way of setting it up. And yeah, it is such an awesome property. Yeah, I've watched so many videos this morning on it, and last week too, as I was doing my research, I was like, man,
Yeah, you have
gotta
to stop by.
gotta go to Orlando now.
Yeah, you have to stop by. Yeah, words and pictures just don't do it justice. You have to actually experience it, and that's what we say. Evermore is an experience. It's not a resort. It's an experience.